Imagine like a future where you go to the doctor, right? And they've got this AI translator that lets them talk to you in any language. Or think about a student, maybe in a remote part of the world, who can suddenly access all this knowledge because AI has broken down the language barrier. That's the kind of future researchers are working on as we speak. And it all comes down to this idea of low-resource languages.
It's fascinating stuff.
So today, we're really doing a deep dive on how machines can be trained to learn even when they don't have a ton of data to work with. Because, let's face it, not every language out there has the same massive digital footprint as, say, English, right?
Right.
We've got this cutting-edge research that's looking at how AI can understand and interact with these languages that haven't had the same level of, I don't know, digital exposure.
It's a huge area of exploration right now.
And it's not just about, like, making sure every smart speaker out there can understand every language. Though I gotta say, that'd be pretty cool.
It would be amazing, yeah.
But this has much bigger implications, right? We're talking about things like economic opportunities for these communities, ways to preserve their cultures in an increasingly digital world. Heck, even the way robots could be used in the future is impacted by this stuff.
It really is about more than just the tech itself. It's about what that tech unlocks for people. And what's really exciting is that this challenge, this whole issue of data scarcity, is actually pushing the boundaries of AI research as a whole. We're seeing really incredible innovation in areas like natural language processing, text-to-speech, speech-to-text, even vision language models, all these things that are rapidly becoming more sophisticated every day.
It's mind-blowing how fast it's all moving. So, okay, we've got this challenge, not enough data for some languages. What are researchers doing about it? Because they're getting creative, that's for sure. One approach that really jumped out at me was this idea of data augmentation. Can you break that down for us? It's kind of like taking the data you do have and like remixing it, right? Subtly changing the wording, maybe adding some noise to the audio, or even creating variations on images, all to make the AI more adaptable.
You got it. Think of it like this. You're teaching a kid with, say, slightly different versions of the same picture book. Each version reinforces the core concepts, but in a slightly different way. It helps with generalization.
Ah, that makes a lot of sense. So you're stretching that limited data as far as possible.
Exactly. And the cool thing is data augmentation, it's not just limited to these, what do we call them, digitally underrepresented languages.
Right.
Even in English, you've got dialects, you've got slang, you've got all these different ways people express themselves. Data augmentation, it helps AI navigate all that nuance.
That's so important. Okay, so we've got data augmentation, but then there's this other thing that sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, and it's called multilingual transfer learning. I mean, can one language really help another language learn?
It can, yeah. Because here's the thing, even if languages seem totally different on the surface, right, underneath it all, there are shared structures. There are patterns that carry over. So a model that's been trained on a language where there's a ton of data, let's say English again,
Right.
that model can actually give a head start to a model that's learning a low-resource language.
Wow. So, like, the language your smart speaker uses to understand you could be helping to preserve an endangered language spoken like on the other side of the planet.
That's the idea.
That's incredible. But okay, this research also gets into some seriously futuristic stuff with something called synthetic data. And this is where, I'll be honest, my brain starts to melt a little bit. They're talking about generating data with algorithms. It's like we're stepping into the matrix here. It's like we're stepping into the matrix here.
It's wild, right? It's like, imagine you've got these algorithms and they're like churning away and they're actually creating new data that looks and feels like real language sentences, stories, conversations.
Okay, so it's not about replacing the real data we do have, right? It's more like we're using these algorithms to like supplement it, give the AI more to chew on.
Exactly. Think of it as a booster shot for those data limited models. But, and this is important, synthetic data, it's a tool, right? It's not some kind of magic solution because the synthetic data is only as good as the algorithms that are creating it.
Ah, so there's still that potential for bias to creep in depending on how the algorithms are designed.
There is. And we could end up with these models that are really good at understanding this very narrow, very artificial version of a language, which, isn't going to be that useful in the real world.
Right, because languages are messy. People use slang, they make up words, there are dialects.
All of that.
So it's a good reminder that even with all this amazing AI tech, we still need human intelligence in the loop, guiding the process, making sure things don't go off the rails. And speaking of human ingenuity, this research also talks about how we're getting smarter about the way we select data to train these AI models?
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting. We're starting to use the models themselves to actually help filter and curate the data. It's like this feedback loop.
So we've got AI helping to train AI. That's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
It is. So as a model, like as it gets better at understanding a language, it can actually start to spot inconsistencies or even errors in the data it's being fed.
Oh, interesting. So it's like it develops a kind of intuition about what makes sense and what doesn't.
In a way, yeah. And there are specific techniques we use for this, things like perplexity scoring. It's basically a way to measure how surprised a model is by a piece of data.
So if the AI is really surprised, that's a sign that the data might be off.
It could be, yeah. It's a sign to take a closer look, at least. It could be bad data. It could just be something unusual. But this is how we're starting to, like, weed out the less useful information and really focus on the good stuff.
The AI is like its own quality control expert.
Pretty much. And like I said, it's still early days for this kind of thing, but the potential is huge, especially for languages that don't have as much digital data out there.
Right, because if you can train the AI to be really picky about its data diet.
Exactly. Then you're not wasting time and resources on stuff that's not going to help it learn effectively.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we've talked about data augmentation, multilingual learning, synthetic data. But this research also mentions some really intriguing sounding AI models. And I have to say, these names sound like they're straight out of a spy thriller.
Yeah.
We've got Llama and Chameleon.
Those are pretty cool names, and they're doing some pretty incredible things, these models.
Okay, so spill the beans. What are these models all about?
Well, Llama, it's all about language. It's showing us that you can get really impressive results in terms of like understanding and generating text, even with way less training data than those traditional AI models.
Okay, so Llama is our language whiz. What about Chameleon?
Chameleon, it's all about multimodality. So that's about learning from both text and images at the same time.
So using pictures to help learn language, kind of like how we learned as kids, right? You see a ball, you hear the word ball, and your brain just like puts it all together.
Exactly. And get this, both Llama and Chameleon, they're actually using those self-improvement techniques we were just talking about.
Wait, so they're not just learning, they're learning to learn.
Yeah.
That's both really cool and kind of freaky at the same time.
It is pretty wild. But the takeaway here is that as these models are fed more data, even if it's not a ton of data, they can actually get better at figuring out what's important and how to learn from it.
So even with limited data, there's still a huge potential for growth and improvement. That's a big deal for these languages that haven't had the same level of digital attention.
Huge.
But, and this is something I really appreciate about this research, it doesn't just focus on the positive. It also acknowledges that we still have a lot to learn in this field. Right.
Oh, absolutely. And that's how it should be, because with any kind of cutting-edge research, the goal isn't just to find answers. It's also about asking new questions, opening up new avenues for exploration.
And one question that really jumped out at me was how we even define a low-resource language in the first place. Because it's not just about how many people speak a language, right?
Exactly. It's more nuanced than that.
Because you could have millions of people speaking a language, but if there's not a lot of that language, online, books, articles, websites, all that stuff, then it's still considered low resource from an AI perspective, right?
You got it. And this actually raises a really important question about how we measure and categorize languages in this increasingly digital world. Because a language that might be considered high resource today could become low resource in the future if people stop using it online as much, right?
That's a really good point. And I mean, think about all the languages that were around long before the internet even existed.
Exactly. So it's not just about the number of speakers, it's about the digital footprint of the language.
It's like we need to create a whole new way of thinking about languages in the context of AI.
We might. Because how we define low resource, it has real-world consequences. Think about funding for research, the development of new language technology. All of that can be influenced by these definitions.
It's a good reminder that even with all these incredible advances in AI, it's still humans who are calling the shots, right?
Yes.
We're setting the goals, we're deciding how these technologies are used.
We are.
We were talking about Llama and Chameleon before, and those were pushing boundaries, but this research also mentions this other really fascinating area called multimodal learning. And that's about adding things like audio and images into the mix, right?
Exactly. And it's a game changer, especially when we're talking about languages with limited data.
Because sometimes a picture really is worth 1,000 words.
Yeah.
Or in this case, maybe 1,000 data points.
1,000 data points, 1,000,000 data points. Because images, they convey so much more than just words, right? You can have cultural nuances, you can have emotional context, you can even have grammatical structures that you might not be able to pick up from text alone.
So we're talking about building these data sets with text and images and audio.
Yeah.
How do we even begin to do that, especially for languages that are already data scarce? I mean, it sounds like a massive project.
It's a big challenge for sure, but, researchers are coming up with some pretty creative solutions.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, some researchers are looking at how we can use stuff that's already out there. Things like videos online that have subtitles. You can imagine, right, how that could be a gold mine for connecting, like, the audio and the visual with the written language.
Right, right. Because then you've got the images from the video, the spoken words, and the text all in one place.
Exactly. And then other researchers are, like, experimenting with crowdsourcing. So basically getting speakers of these languages to contribute images and audio and text that can be used to train these AI models.
So it's like a global effort to, I don't know, democratize AI.
Yeah, I like that. Because, and this is something I find really exciting, these advances that are coming out of this need to support data-limited languages, they could actually end up benefiting everyone in the long run.
Oh, how so?
Well, think about it. The same techniques that help an AI model learn a language where there's not a lot of data, those same techniques can also make AI more efficient for languages like English where there's a ton of data.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So it's like by tackling this challenge for languages with fewer speakers, we're actually pushing the boundaries of what AI can do for everyone.
Exactly. It means faster innovation. It means more sophisticated applications. It means a wider range of possibilities, really. And, when you get down to it, we're not just making AI more inclusive by doing this. We're actually making it smarter and faster and more versatile overall.
That's really cool. It's like this rising tide that lifts all boats kind of situation.
I like that analogy. Because we're moving toward a future where language is no longer this, like, insurmountable barrier to opportunity.
Imagine, like, a world where anyone can access information, create art, build a business, connect with people on the other side of the world, and they can do all of that through the power of AI no matter what language they speak. It's a pretty amazing thing to think about.
It's a powerful vision. And, the work that's being done right now with these low-resource languages, that's paving the way for that future.
Yeah. It's exciting stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, from data augmentation to multilingual learning, synthetic data, even those cool-sounding AI models like Llama and Chameleon. And we talked about how this push to make AI work for everyone, no matter what language they speak, is ultimately leading to a more innovative and inclusive future for all of us.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And for our listeners who want to learn more, maybe dig into some of this research themselves, we've got links to everything we talked about in the show notes. Be sure to check it out.
Definitely do.
This has been an incredible deep dive into the world of low-resource languages and the future of AI. Until next time, everyone, keep those brains buzzing.